right here with Miss Dannielle Brown. We are back for another episode of the State of Black Mental Health and Policing in America on Tilt. Miss Dannielle, how are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm wonderful. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to see you. So hey, another show, probably show number 6, and I'm grateful.
I'm grateful for you. I was going to say this is a week of gratitude and being thankful and expressing that appreciation. What is Mama Brown thankful and grateful for in her life right now?
To be very real, I'm grateful that it's day 143 of this hunger strike, and God has sustained me. And I'm grateful that in Him sustaining me, that He is moving mountains out of my way and obstacles so that I can continue this fight for the mothers who tears and cries I hear. I'm thankful for my son that's here on this earth. And I'm thankful for being a mom to an angel who is son who is now in heaven. I'm thankful that I can breathe because I understand what suffocation means. I'm thankful for you, Julius. Thankful for everyone at One Hood. I'm thankful for our special guests. And I'm thankful that this is COVID and we will get through it. And I am hoping everyone will stay safe. And I will see everyone, including myself, on the other side of this.
Mm. You said it all. You said it all. It's there's something about, especially right now, being able to reflect on what you're grateful for. There are a whole lot of people who are struggling, who are finding it difficult to identify things to be grateful for. And just to hear you express that, knowing where you're at with your journey, Miss Dannielle, knowing the fight that you continue to fight, that brings me joy that you're still able to be grateful and practice gratitude, right? It's as much of a practice as it is about reflection too. So it just brings me joy just to hear that you are grateful for the things you mentioned. So we appreciate you guys joining us on uh, this special gratitude Thanksgiving edition. I know some folks do celebrate, others don't celebrate. It's not up to us to tell you what to celebrate or what not to celebrate, but we think it's important to be grateful and to express that appreciation. So, Miss Dannielle, we do have another special guest with us today. I know that you actually brought this individual to my attention. I had heard of this person before. I've known that they've been involved in supporting some folks in the movement, and you just really said we need to get this person on the show. So I was hoping you could say a few things before we bring them on.
Well, I would like to introduce the one and only Paul Jubas. He's a young attorney in the Pittsburgh community area, but he also has worked in other locations through the state of Pennsylvania. You might even find him hanging out in the streets in Philadelphia. He's just a phenomenal attorney. But even more so, what attracted me to him is he is so down to earth as an attorney. You know, most attorneys that I've dealt with, and trust me, guys, I'm dealing with a lot of attorneys. He is not stuck up. He's easy to talk to. He'll explain things to you in layman's terms. He is a grassroots type of person. So he understands the struggle. He understands, like how, we can't always understand everything because the movement means so much different to many of us. Like we can all interpret the movement differently. But one thing for sure, there is a movement, and it's good to have somebody that you can say, understands it, have seen their face attached to it, and know that, they're representing their clients with the understanding that Black Lives Matter, mental health matter, and the state of policing in America, there's a problem. There's a problem. He understands that too. And for the ladies, easy to look at too. Just like you, Julius. He's easy on the eyes. Always got to have a good attorney that's easy on the eyes.
Can I say I plead the fifth on that, Paul? Can I plead the fifth on responding to that? Paul Jubas, thank you for joining us, brother.
Thanks for having me, y'all.
Definitely. Miss Brown, I feel like you probably got a dozen questions that you would like to ask him. Why don't you kick us off?
Well, welcome, Paul Jubas. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Well, thank you for joining us. I know your schedule is extremely hectic. I know, because I've been watching you in the media, and I mean, look, you're an attorney. We all been trained that attorneys are busy. I don't know if y'all really are busy, but that's kind of what y'all need us to believe.
Yeah,
sometimes y'all don't always return our calls.
Yeah, I mean, it's typically the schedule is pretty packed, but with COVID has thrown so many obstacles into the mix that what used to be a 10 to 15 to 20 minute task has become a 3-hour task. So it's always so unpredictable. The system is always changing so much with new orders from the governor, from the county, or from the courthouse itself. And there's so many different courthouses, from the prisons. We have a lot of clients to talk to in prison, and that changes day by day based on whether any COs have come down with COVID. So it's turned into quite the scheduling mess.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. Let our community know just who Paul Jubas is.
So I'm 34. I came to Pittsburgh for law school back in 2008, and I graduated and passed the bar in 2011. Originally from Houston, Texas. My mom moved me to Western PA by herself. She was 21 when she had me. So when I was a little baby, she moved me to Western PA, and I was fortunate that she, took me out of Houston, Texas. I saw the way my family was raised, my cousins that didn't get out, and it didn't go too well for them. So I was moved to Western PA by my mom, and we lived Western PA, small town Trump country. I lived the white struggle, but I didn't have to live the brown and black struggle, in Houston, Texas. And that was something that, really advantaged me a lot and allowed me to take a road that led to me going to law school and, now having my own law practice.
Wow. So you leaving Texas for Western Pennsylvania, raised in Western Pennsylvania. Did you come in contact with any Black people?
I'm from Ebensburg. I lived in Ebensburg and Crescent. Your basic, small town, Pennsylvania, which I don't necessarily think is a derogatory term. That's a legitimate description of, what these places are like. And, I have a lot of love for a lot of the people that I grew up with, and they're racist places. It's ingrained, but, it's funny because, and Dannielle, I think I told you this before, the first time that I ever heard Changes by Tupac, which is something that song, played a very important role in me wanting to go the direction that I've gone. The first time I ever heard it was, in a hick farmhouse, in my friend's place, who had a couple of hick brothers who were banging Tupac. And then the next song that came on was Buffalo Soldier by Bob Marley. And it's strange, being in my position now, where I'm working on a number of high profile Black Lives Matter cases, taking on the police, and a lot of the Trump supporters that I grew up with, who are, police lives matter, all lives matter, are, sliding into my DMs with messages of support, and they're asking intelligent questions, so it's not as cut and dry, as our politics, of course, makes it out to be. So, it was definitely an interesting upbringing, and I think it's given me a good perspective, coming into this fight.
So what actually got you into wanting to take on, like, what drew you to you're an attorney, you could have practiced in any area. Matter of fact, tell our viewers exactly what area you practice in, because your profile says various areas of law. So can you share a little bit of what areas you practice in, and how you've been able to link that to the Black Lives Movement?
Yeah, I do criminal defense and civil rights. I wasn't practicing in Pittsburgh until the past few years. I was practicing in Philadelphia. Now, I lived in Pittsburgh. I owned a few small businesses. That's what I was doing in Pittsburgh. I was just, focusing on my businesses here. And then my law practice was pretty much just limited to some wrongful convictions that were going on in Philadelphia. And, I got a lot of great experience because the system in Philadelphia is so much different than the system that we have here in Allegheny County. It has a complex ecosystem for the struggle, for the fight against corruption, and for the fight against systemic racism and police brutality. It is a very robust system for people of, that are like-minded like us to take on the system. And I, was, how, if you want to say, fortunate enough to be thrown into the center of corruption in Philadelphia with a number of the cases that I'm handling. And it really prepared me when I did finally start to take cases here in Pittsburgh, to take on the system the way that I am, because that robust system, whether it's from, the activists on the streets, from the civil rights attorneys and the judges and the FBI and the United States Attorney's Office. It's a much different situation here in Pittsburgh. The ecosystem is not predatory in Pittsburgh towards corruption and towards police violence the way that it is in Philadelphia. So I'm very, speaking about being thankful, I'm very thankful for the experience and the connections that I made in Philadelphia, which, prepared me for a much different fight here in Pittsburgh.
So Paul, you mentioned a word that grabbed my attention, corruption, and what that looks like in cases that you're working in Philly, and also what that looks like in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. Could you speak more to Allegheny County about how you navigate as an attorney, as someone who strikes me as having a moral compass? How do you navigate your responsibility to the people you're representing, and all the sort of corrupt landmines within the system? How do you navigate that as a morally conscious attorney?
So I basically, especially here in Pittsburgh, it's a different type of commitment to fight corruption here than it is to fight it in Philadelphia. You have to be prepared for the consequences here in Pittsburgh. In Philadelphia, I would have a lot of support in the legal community, not just in attorneys that are willing to take on those fights with you, but also, building on the shoulders of giants, building on the shoulders of the people that have been in that fight before. There is a robust history in Philadelphia of great lawyers great FBI agents, great United States attorneys' offices taking on big fights. That is not the case here. It is a very lonesome decision to make. And when I decide, one of the reasons I wasn't practicing in Pittsburgh was because of that. I knew that I can successfully and with support fight corruption in Philadelphia. You pick up the phone, in Philadelphia and say, these are the homicide detectives that I'm investigating, and I can get 5 extremely experienced and successful lawyers that have already taken the fight to those detectives. Here, that is not the case. So you're a lot more exposed here in Allegheny County. And I think from you can look at it from a hierarchical perspective. Start at the United States Attorney's Office. In the United States Attorney's Office in Philadelphia, they are taking and have been, they have a strong history of taking the fight to corruption in Philadelphia. The United States Attorney's Office is actually somewhat subservient to the District Attorney's Office here in Allegheny County, because the District Attorney is so politically powerful, so well connected. And, it's just the ecosystem is not built to take on corruption the way it is in Philadelphia. So, it's much more of a Wild West here.
So when you talk about the ecosystem, what do we need to be thinking about to start to have some of the successes that a place like Philly has had with regard to the ecosystem? What can organizers be doing? What can attorneys be doing? What do we need to be thinking about?
So, a perfect example. First off, it starts with the District Attorney's Office. When you're talking, if we don't have a United States Attorney's Office that is going to swoop in and actually fight corruption, then you got to look to the District Attorney. Our District Attorney here is corrupt in and of himself. So, he's not going to do anything. Here is a prime example of how Allegheny County is different than Philadelphia. Her name is Peg Sherwood. Peg Sherwood is a homicide detective that over the past couple of years was charged for lying, for framing a kid. She framed a kid, black kid. It was learned that she framed him for murder. After he got out, he was murdered.
In Allegheny County?
Yes.
When did this happen?
So this happened I believe he was murdered in 17 or 18. Now this is such a for me, this was such a frustrating case. I wasn't operating here at the time. I'd like to think that if I was, I could have changed things, but the timing didn't work out that way. This could have been a landmark case, because when you have this, now, mind you, from an ecosystem perspective, this is not present in Pittsburgh. In Philadelphia, if you have a detective, a homicide detective, that was just charged for framing somebody and lying in police reports, you would have a line of post-conviction criminal attorneys and civil rights attorneys. And you would have, the courts would be dealing with an absolute onslaught from these attorneys. The post-conviction attorneys would be case after case of homicide convictions with life sentences, would be building the record of all the times that police officer got caught in a lie in that case. And it's not very difficult because they're not the smartest. So, and they do the same tricks over and over again. So there are lawyers in Philadelphia who are just hunting cases from these corrupt detectives. That is why, when I talk about the ecosystem, it is a much more predatory system against corruption. You have these civil rights lawyers who are about to profit significantly Since 2012, and it's because of a bit of a different situation that I won't go into right now, because they actually had a police officer break the blue wall of silence in Philadelphia, which is also a big reason that Philadelphia is the way that it is. There have been thousands of exonerations and millions upon millions of dollars in civil liability against these officers that get caught lying. Now, let's go back here to Allegheny County. You know how many lawsuits and got filed as a result of Peg Sherwood being charged and pleading guilty? That many.
Wow.
There is no ecosystem for it here. It's one of the things, I'm not trying to say I'm going to build the whole ecosystem, but I'm out here in Allegheny County acting like there is one and composing myself as if that is the expectation.
So it seems like we're caught. It seems like in Pittsburgh, it's kind of
1960s Alabama,
trapped in some type of time capsule.
It's ridiculous. I've been now. And this is something that I do want to research a little bit more in depth. But based on what I've seen in Philadelphia, based on and I also study police corruption generally across the country. So I'm familiar with the situations. I've been saying that Allegheny County is the worst criminal system in the country. Now, I can't confirm that right now, but based on what I know, there is no, like I said, there is no ecosystem for taking on corruption or for an ecosystem for taking on corrupt cops. The closest thing that we have is a Pittsburgh Police Review Board, and Pittsburgh Police Review Board doesn't have jurisdiction over the entire county. There is no conviction integrity unit here. We don't even have a conviction review unit. A conviction review unit is like at least a fake version of a conviction integrity unit. At least the district attorney's offices across the country that have a conviction review unit, at least they're pretending to do something. The conviction integrity units like the one in Philadelphia, they're churning out exonerations on life sentences every other week. The people, and there's another, when you're talking about the ecosystem, Julius, there's another, this is, and I don't understand why, that this is the most direct way to have the reparations conversation. Because, you look at what's happening in Philadelphia with all these exonerations, these guys and police violence isn't limiting to killing people. Police violence includes lying on somebody and locking them up for the rest of their lives. There are every other week, these guys are getting exonerated and they're getting, 10, 14, 15 $million civil rights settlements, and a lot of that money is going back into the community as well. So, there is, a very quick, they're worried that it's going to bankrupt Philadelphia, the amount of civil rights liability that's owed to these exonerees, so it is a totally different place that we are in here. And we are so far, it's actually hard to imagine being further behind the 8 ball in terms of getting justice than we are in this county.
So, Paul, you just mentioned something, excuse me, that I think is important for us to think about, and that's the money component of this. Now, you mentioned that some people are fearful that these payouts are going to bankrupt the city. So, how much of a role does money play into this ecosystem that you're talking about? I know we talk about politics. And politics is wrapped up in money. But could you talk a little bit more about that and expand on how that could possibly be hindering the strengthening of this ecosystem in Allegheny County?
Yeah. So, the money situation, it cuts both ways. Where Pittsburgh has much less money. Allegheny County has much less money than a place like Philadelphia. Philadelphia has a lot of money, but it's also the poorest city in the nation. So, but it also, on the other hand, what better incentive is there than money? And that plays to the ecosystem. In Philadelphia, I know a number of stereotypical scumbag, greedy lawyers who are just trying to turn a buck. However, because of the nature of the ecosystem there, those guys are crushing corrupt police officers. Those guys are, taking people that were in jail and now getting them back on the street with a couple of $1 million in their pockets, or a couple $100,000 in their pockets. So it goes both ways. Like that we're hampered by money, but also civil liability is an Achilles heel for a system. Pittsburgh, the city of Pittsburgh self-insures. So if we had a system, an ecosystem, a predatory ecosystem that was composed of a bunch of lawyers that were incentivized to take the fight to these police officers, I bet you the city of Pittsburgh and the voters would be a lot more likely to take serious steps to change police culture if we're dishing out way too much money. At this point, we're not. We've only dished out like $15 million worth of civil liability since Leon got shot. I'm approximating there, but look at Philadelphia. They're dishing out $15 million in one case, and for one wrongful conviction. So it's just we have a lot of work to do here.
We do. We definitely do. I mean, it's such a stark difference from Philly to Pittsburgh, and we're talking about 3 hours away in the same state. Mm-hmm. That's extremely crazy to me. Let's talk a little bit about your clients. I know we can't go into names or anything like that, but in dealing with your clients, and a lot of them you represent are activists or blacktivists. I have to go back to Nikki Jo and keep throwing her word in there. How is that relationship from balancing that of an attorney to, I've seen you walk with these families in protest situations. Yes, there's one of them. How does that what's the word I'm looking for? How do you balance those two roles as an attorney and as in picking up a sign and could be associated with Black Lives Matter? Are you associated with Black Lives Matter?
Yeah. I mean, I don't. It's not political. It's a factual statement. I'm affiliated, with a fight for justice. That is at my core. That's what led me here. And that's what led me to representing Black people. And Black activists and some families that aren't activists, some families that don't know anything about the political situation. They just want to be left alone. But yeah, it's a fight for justice. And it just so happens that if you are going to fight for justice in this system, you're going to be representing a lot of Black people because they're the ones that are seeing the most injustice. So, but getting into the difficulty and the challenge of representing people in these situations, there is absolutely no playbook for this. There is nothing that you can do to prepare for this. There are sometimes, in some cases, like in a situation like baby Marcus, I was very lucky to get involved with that family. Right now, baby Marcus was killed back in 2013. Right now, when all this came out in 2020, so that was 7 years after he got shot and killed. Mimi, who is his mother, she's young. I think she's a few years younger than me. I'm 34. She's the oldest sister of a few sisters. I based on what I know, she had a very difficult time, as would any mother losing their 1-year-old baby. So, from a mental health perspective in 2013, and this is no criticism, Mimi was a mess, as anybody would be. Now, fast forward to 2020, when Mimi starts getting her phone blown up by everybody saying, you need to turn on the TV, they let baby Marcus's murder loose. This was not the young, confused, scared woman that just lost her 1-year-old baby. Mimi now is a fucking soldier. Pardon my French. Mimi is a rock. When I first met with the family, and they had so many supporters, Mimi's quiet and she's reserved, but I misjudged that. I thought that I thought it was going to be a bit more difficult communicating with her. I didn't realize that this woman was just sitting back and listening. She was just gathering everything in. And it wasn't until she did this very cool with her sisters, who were also shot by the same individual. They did a very cool interview with WPXI, 30-minute interview. And I didn't think Mimi was going to say anything. And she went off. She just went off. And so there's clients like that. And full disclosure, I represent Dannielle as well. Dannielle is an extremely strong individual. But then you have a situation like, cases that I can't even get into, where the police, beat a 63-year-old disabled Black woman in her house, who, this was a woman that she's had 3 spinal surgeries before, 60 some years old, had her knees replaced, this was not a violent call. The cops just showed up and decided that they were going to put it on this woman, and they snapped her arm in half. And, seeing her and talking to her, there is a trauma there. She had absolute post-traumatic stress disorder. That she was probably just never shake. And then I represent other mothers whose sons have been killed by police, and it's not a surprise to get a 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock call, 3 a.m, or a text. Hey, are you up? Can you talk right now? Because they can't sleep, and because they're racking their brain over how the system is handled. Like, how do I still not know this? How do I still not know that? Is this bad? And it's just there is no way to properly handle this. All you can do in representing people that have been subject to this government's violence, all you can do is breathe with them and listen and hope. It's one of the strange things about people asking me how my cases are going. My cases are never going well. My cases can't go well. Maybe we win a trial and maybe we get a good payout. That doesn't do anything. It doesn't bring, maybe that'll help me to build my law practice. but at the end of the day, I'm here because somebody's son was murdered by a cop. And, that's the system has completely just supported the murderer and has kept the mother on the outside looking in the entire time. So, even when good things or positive developments occur, it's impossible to say that, oh yeah, it's going well. It's not going well. This is not a good situation. If I'm involved with a family, it's not a positive thing.
Paul, you just brought to light something for me, and I see Miss Dannielle, you're moved in a way, mentally and emotionally with this conversation as well. Paul, it makes me think about the sort of pseudo therapeutic hat or peer support hat that you have to wear, and that I think all attorneys are called to wear. And that's a difficult position to be in, but it's also a reality of the job. And the thing I want to acknowledge, I'll speak for myself, I won't speak for Miss Dannielle, but I get a deep sense of your humanity and how you show up in those moments, for the people you're working with and standing with during those moments of trauma and mental health struggles. So I do want to talk a little bit about that. What kind of relationships or partnership processes or working processes do you have with mental health professionals or social workers or folks that work within the mental health profession to be able to support you or support some of the clients that you work with? How do you navigate those conversations and trying to ensure that your clients have some semblance of mental health support as you're going through what usually is the most traumatic moment of their lives?
Yeah, and it's there is no set professional that I'll call. However, I've been very lucky, although like we had mentioned before, Allegheny County and Pittsburgh's ecosystem is not nearly what it needs to be. There are a number of very strong people that are active around here, and one of those people is Fawn. And Fawn is she's so experienced, and she has so much love for the community that she's somebody that I know I can talk to about a mother that's having a really difficult time. And I'm a 34-year-old Mexican man. I don't have any kids. I have a dog that I love dearly, and it's my firstborn. But there are as a Black woman going through these things, there are a lot of things that I am not equipped to to communicate on certain levels with, and that's a place where I'm very blessed to have connections with strong people like Fawn and some of the other there's some really strong activists around here that are just at all times. It doesn't matter what time of the day it is. It doesn't matter what the situation is. It doesn't matter if it's a dangerous situation. There are a number of activists around here that will just show up for traumatized Black women, and it's not I can't call a hotline, or I can't call this organization. Maybe there's some out there, and I know that Dannielle has been talking about a foundation that would be designed to help families navigate these types of situations. So I would be very happy to see an organization like that. But for the time being, and it's not a negative thing, because people like Fawn, people like Brandy Fisher, they're there, and they know, and they care.
You brought me to very rare I have these little moments, but I had just an emotional one when you were talking about the mothers, and you were saying, every case, when someone asks you how's your case going, that you're like, I can never give a good report. Because I can't give that mother or that family their loved ones back. You just can't. And, we may put a lot on our attorneys to work miracles, but ultimately, what we're really saying is we want accountability. And we want accountability such that we can't bring our loved ones back. But we want this system to know that you just cannot take away our promised seed and traumatize a Black community as such. And there's no change. There's no change. You're Pittsburgh, and I have not had the years in Pittsburgh, but in the short time that I've been in Pittsburgh, it's always the same status quo. It seems like a city where no one really challenges or rally up the troops beyond the activism that you see. Like, where's the political rally up? Where's the celebrity rally up? And all these other, prominent groups that can step up. Still smiling, Julius corporation, organization, company, and a lot of other ones are trying to make an impact into the community, but they need the help of the community and people, entities much larger than them. And it's difficult sometimes. It's difficult because they work on these committees. They want to impact change, but it just seems so hard and so many loopholes. So, do you want to know what's the state of our mental health? And Mama Brown gonna cuss. Everybody watch out. We fucked up. For real. For real. We fucked up. Because we need resources. We need accountability. And we're tired of fighting for things that should be basic and not hard. So I teared up because you're right. No case you have is going to be a good case. Even when you are successful in that case, there's a loss.
Yeah. I'm just go ahead, Julius.
I was going to say, after hearing all of us kind of weigh in, what I've experienced in Pittsburgh is that it always comes back to, I think, two things. Power. You can kind of say power / influence, or power parentheses influence, in money. And so what Miss Dannielle was talking about in terms of wanting the justice and why are we not getting it, and then Paul also talking about what's happening in Philly. It sounds like in Philly they've started to, we talk about being on tilt, they've started to tilt the power structure a little bit, or redistribute where the power is. So Pittsburgh, because it's the biggest smallest city in the country, it's like word travels so quickly, and there's always the usual suspects that are in, I'm using my air quotes, that are in power, from the political space to the legal space to the nonprofit space. It's usually a handful of individuals or groups or entities that are like pulling those, sort of puppeteering the strings. So I say that to say it's it's going to take some really radical, committed people to literally uproot that here in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. We've got radical, committed, humane people that are fighting, but it's siloed. It's not this, like, sort of collective, we're all moving in unison and marching to the beat of the same drum. We've tried to do that, but then we end up being in our silo. So I say all that to say, and Paul, maybe you could speak to this. What, because I'm sure there was a point in time where Philly wasn't where they are now. Like they weren't having the successes with the forgive me for using the wrong terminology, but the civil suits or the payouts. Like, how did they get to that point? What happened to propel them to being able to start to see justice in that way?
So there was one, a person. It's not. This did not happen the way you think it would. There was a very unique situation where Philadelphia was the not so proud home of one of the most notorious gangs that there was. Philadelphia is a nasty place, but this gang was in the Philadelphia Police Department. It was in the narcotics field unit. And it was within the narcotics field unit, a special elite force called the Violent Response Team. Now, the Violent Response Team was basically your biggest, baddest dudes in the Philadelphia Police Department. And the brass got together and they said they got the Violent Response Team together and they said, get us numbers. We don't care what you do. We got your back. If the DA's office or internal affairs or the United States Attorney's office or the FBI come knocking, we'll cover for you. You get us numbers. And that gang went on an absolute tear through Philadelphia, on the streets for over 10 years. The guy that was behind the main guy that created all of this change, his name was Jeff Walker. Jeff is still alive, but Jeff is very much in danger now. Jeff was one of the baddest dudes on the Violent Response Team. Jeff was about a 6'4", 270-pound black dude, dreads down to his shoulders. Scariest dude that you don't want to see this dude walking towards you on a street at night. And one day, Jeff decided that he was going to New Jersey to the casino, and he needed to get some money before he did that. So he rolled over to a drug dealer's house, beat his ass, stole $15,000 from him, walked out the door, and was surrounded by 3 black SUVs because Jeff didn't realize that the drug dealer that he just beat up was a federal informant. So Jeff gets locked up by the feds. Feds have him on thousands of crimes that he committed along with the rest of this team. And they tell him, look, you either open the doors for us or you're going to jail for a very long time. So Jeff, now, and I know so much about this because Jeff has shared an awful lot of information with me. Jeff made a phone call to his sister. And his sister was also a Philadelphia police officer. And he told her what just happened. She heard through the grapevine already. And she said, your mother, who is passed, your mother would be disgusted with you. You need to make this right. Oh, and by the way, I didn't tell you yet, but I have terminal cancer. And then she hung up on him. That night, he made the decision that he was going to break the blue wall of silence, and he opened up the doors to the feds. And since then, Jeff Walker doing that, breaking the blue wall of silence, that is the case that Larry Krasner, as a civil rights attorney, took charge of. Larry Krasner, who is behind tons of big-time civil rights victories in Philadelphia, is now the district attorney of Philadelphia. And he, along with the federal defender, or with the Philadelphia Defender's Office, along with Jeff Walker, are responsible for thousands and thousands and thousands of exonerations. And the Philadelphia Police Department, since Jeff broke the blue wall of silence, has, it still, of course, has a lot of problems. It's a massive police force in the poorest city in the country. But, it's been a force that, that the breaking the blue wall, that in and of itself has created, an incredible dynamic within the system, within the ecosystem, which has created this expectation that when, a crooked cop gets caught, he's about to lose his job, versus, here in Pittsburgh, where you just don't even know if it's going to come out.
That's interesting. So it reminds me of Rayful Edmonds in Washington, the DMV area. He was notorious. And, in order to kind of save his mom, he kind of had to do the same. And it also affected officers as well. But then there's a code, and it's called snitch. So, I don't know what the climate is here in Pittsburgh, but I don't know if people operate, which are protecting these officers, by a code of you better not snitch. Because if you snitch, you'll be in a ditch.
Yeah, and that's like, with Jeff, I speak with Jeff pretty regularly. Jeff was the guy that got Meek Mill out of prison. So, one of the officers that initially arrested Meek Mill, he was on the violent response team with Jeff. So, when Meek Mill got violated by Judge Brinkley, she sends him to, on a violation to 2 to 4 years in state prison. Jay-Z, and his organization, they started spending a ton of money on lawyers to fight his violation and to try to get him out. And they were throwing the kitchen sink at that case. The highest powered lawyers in New York and Philadelphia were taking on everybody in the system, taking on the judge, and they weren't getting anywhere. Meek Mill was just rotting away, in a prison cell for 2 to 4 years. And then Jeff started piping up, and he was like, let me tell you a little bit about Reggie Graham, who I worked with for years, who I stole with for years. And that's what got Meek Mill out. Wow. So, and he's not celebrated the way that Jay-Z and that organization is celebrated for getting Meek Mill out, but that's what happened. Now let's go, over to Pittsburgh. And this was getting back to the Peg Sherwood situation, the homicide detective that was charged for lying in a case. And this is just so infuriating for somebody working in this ecosystem. Her defense attorney cut a plea deal, and he said in the press, he says that, well, they weren't going to take it to trial because they didn't want all of the dirty secrets to come out about her partners. Because guess what? All of these homicide detectives are doing the exact same stuff. I want to tell you one of the most insightful things when I first started getting involved in investigating and litigating police corruption. One of the most insightful things came from a federal lawyer that I was talking to. And I was investigating this particular Philadelphia homicide detective. And I asked him, I was like, hey, so, what are your thoughts on so-and-so, Detective so-and-so? And I knew that this guy was a liar. I hadn't caught him but I knew it smelled. It's very difficult to prove corruption without somebody like a Jeff Walker. So I spoke with this federal lawyer and I said, hey, so what are your thoughts about Detective so-and-so? And he said something that was extremely interesting. He said, and it caught me off guard at first. He said, he's one of the good ones. And I sat back and I was like, I wasn't expecting to hear that. And he said, he tells the truth some of the time. And then I was like, oh, so to be a homicide detective in a big city, you guys know what they're working with. You know that very few people in the community want to help them for obvious reasons, good reasons. A lot of times these guys are just working cases and banking overtime. The homicide detectives are making usually well over $100,000. Homicide detectives make a lot of money per year. So to think that the good homicide detectives are telling the truth some of the time, what does that mean for our wrongful conviction problem?
Wow.
Well, to me, it sounds like it means they play a direct role in it. I mean, that's part of what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like if you're lying most of the time, the good ones are lying, most of the time, what does that mean about the bad ones? Those are the ones that are framing people. That happens regularly. Peg Sherwood got caught doing it, but she had no ramifications. There were no consequences because of that. And that is an attitude that needs to change within this ecosystem. We really need, the lawyers around here, and I am seeing some signs of improvement. I am seeing some more aggression, coming out of the lawyers in this area. So that's a good thing. But it's a daunting task. We are up against a very serious monster. But also, although I'm sitting here saying that the ecosystem here in Pittsburgh, in Allegheny County, is as bad as anywhere in any legal system in the country, because of our size and the timing of all of this, we're coming off of, things have died down a bit, but we're coming off of, the most extreme civil rights movement, arguably in history. So you mark that timing with the fact that a lot of the establishment players that are responsible for the structure of this ecosystem, they're on their way out over the course of the next 5 years. So although we are up against, significant hurdles, there's over 100 police departments in Allegheny County. So there's just massive systemic inefficiencies that make the injustice even more difficult to fight. We're in a position where we're going to have a new county executive in the next couple of years. We're going to have a new district attorney in the next couple of years. Unless Peduto starts getting his act together, we're going to have a new mayor. So, within 5 years, the people in this area have a golden opportunity to completely restructure this system. So although it's the worst right now, if we can get our shit together, we can make it a class act, because it's not as if these are just like amorphous issues that we're dealing with. These are there are definite steps, definite structures that can be put in place in this system to start writing things. So we have a golden opportunity. That's one of the reasons that I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm going as hard as I am in Allegheny County, because we have a chance.
Well, I was going to ask you for a final call to action. That sounds like it's it, Paul. You summed us up, brought us. Miss Dannielle, you have any final thoughts?
We're in a season of gratitude. This is Thanksgiving week. For all the victims out there who have been subject to police brutality, injustice, and or connected to people who are having traumatic emotional setbacks because of the state of mental health and policing here in America, in Pittsburgh. You know, Julius, we didn't do this at the beginning of the show, but can we take a second to have a moment of silence for people like me who have suffered great loss, and for people and other mothers and families right now this week where it's Thanksgiving, but they're missing their loved ones right now. And some of them can't even afford an attorney to even get justice. That breaks my heart too.
Thank you for bringing that into the space, Miss Dannielle. As Miss Dannielle said, we are grateful for everyone who joined us. Paul, thank you for your time, your energy. Keep fighting, keep doing the work. We're going to continue to do the work. Everyone have a blessed time. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you, Paul.
Take care.